Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Burn Your Draft, the podcast exploring the Reed College senior thesis process. I'm Ace Lackey, your podcast producer. This episode takes us back to my first ever interview. Today, I'll be chatting with Emilie Kelly about war, memory, storytelling, and the most important thing to keep in mind while trying to finish your thesis.
My name is Emilie Kelly. I grew up in Pelham, New York, which is a suburb of New York City, and I am part of the Anthropology department with my amazing advisor, Charlene Makeley. And my thesis is called Changing of the Guards / Changing of the House, Nationalism and Memory at Berlin's Neue Wache.
Oh, that's how it's pronounced.
Yes. You can call it New Guardhouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a lot easier for me to say as somebody who has studied absolutely no German.
The Neue Wache. Yeah, I got New Wake a lot.
So, what is your thesis about?
Okay, so the one sentence thing that I give is National War Memorialization in Berlin. More specifically, National War Memorialization at this one memorial called the Neue Wache, or New Guardhouse in English. It has existed since 1818. It was originally like a Prussian imperial guardhouse, and over the years, it's, in central Berlin, and as the sort of like government and the state government changed, what that building was used for changed as well. And so for every, 4 or 5 different distinct governmental eras, there was a corresponding memorial era that sort of reflected the way that nation or nation state saw their own history and their own sort of cultural memory.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It's really interesting.
So why did you end up choosing this for your thesis?
So I studied abroad in Berlin fall semester of my junior year, and I had studied German for 2 years before. I just thought Berlin was kind of cool. I had some family history in Germany, and within the first week of me being in Berlin during my student orientation tour, they brought us on a memorial tour of some of Berlin's memorials. And I walked into this memorial, and it's actually just a big house, basically.
Fully furnished and everything?
It's not fully furnished at all. That's the thing.
Empty house.
It's a big old empty house. It's almost like a mausoleum in the middle of the Royal Boulevard, so in the middle of the old Prussian seat of Berlin. Major tourist attraction. People are walking by. It's really crowded and busy outside, and you walk in and it's almost silent. And it's black cobblestone floor and stone ceilings and a skylight on the top that lets in light, and when it's snowing and raining, it lets in snow and rain, and it just drops onto a Käthe Kollwitz statue of a mother holding her dead son. And it's intense. The feeling I felt when I walked in it wasn't grief, it wasn't anger, it wasn't hope, it was all of those things. It was feeling connected with all of the other people who were there. It was feeling disconnected from all the other people who were there because we were all standing apart from each other and not talking. And I went, yeah, I can write a year's worth of content on this.
That certainly sounds like the emotions that would need to be behind a year's worth of writing.
Yeah. And so the more that I dug into it, the more I realized how vague it is and how sort of open-ended it is as a memorial, where they've taken out a lot of the sort of national symbology of the place and are attempting to make a more universal war memorial, which is really tough because that's not really how war memorials work. It's usually one side against the other. But Berlin has been a lot of different nations, and it's been at war with itself. And so it's this question of how do you make a memorial for the victims of war and tyranny?
So it was really this personal experience that you had with this memorial, with this location, that made you decide, I'm going to write about this place specifically.
Yeah, I think it was this really condensed feeling that I had felt in smaller ways in other places, but the impact of walking in and being like, oh my God, I'm feeling all of these things right now. Also the fact that it's a very public memorial and Germans are really good about keeping records, and there is a mass of information on this place. So I was actually able to find this like 200-page anthology of newspaper articles that were written in 1993 when it reopened 3 years after reunification, and like all of this just like raw primary information. And so that made it a lot easier, and it made it feasible to write a thesis that could be somewhat contained and also as sort of broad and complicated as it was.
I'd imagine some people are super envious you have that much primary information.
I mean, thesis is so tough because, like, you know, you want to find something that you can spend a year writing about, but also something that eventually has to come to an end. So, so it's this weird sort of gray area. And, like, for people coming into thesis, I would definitely recommend, like, taking that into account when you're thinking about choosing a topic.
So what was your process for working on the thesis? What did an average day of working on it look like?
It was sort of split into 3 parts, because I didn't do my field work until halfway through thesis.
Because I've heard you're not supposed to be allowed to do it the summer beforehand.
Oh, they say that. They actually would like for you to do that, because a lot of the times, like, if you're doing ethnographic fieldwork in anthropology, and, like, that's the basis of your thesis, so if you haven't done that, you don't really have anything to write about. I had all that archival material.
So that was your first semester?
That was my first semester. The book was called Der Neue Wache unter den Linden by Christoph Stossel, who was he used to be the director of the Berlin Museum, I want to say, Berlin History Museum. And so that was a primary source for me. I just was compiling different theorists that I was thinking about using, just sort of learning the history of the memorial. And then late December, I spent 10 days in Berlin, and I shadowed 4 different memorial tours from 2 different memorial tour companies. One was more focused on just like general Berlin memorials, sort of like the sites you should see, main sites tour. The other one was specifically about like Holocaust remembrance and war resistance memorials, and so they were a lot smaller, and there were a lot more like personal stories that were shared during those tours. But both of them covered the Neue Wache, the new guardhouse. And it was really intense. It was, like talking with the guides, talking with the other tour participants, about why they chose to go on a memorial tour, like what kind of stakes people have about remembering history, if it reminded them of anything else, like both the memorial I was studying and also just the larger world of like memorials, and also that relationship with like tourism and commerce. And this is about the time when my research starts kind of spreading, because
there's too much.
There's a lot. I was like, do I do anthropology of death? Do I do anthropology of tourism? Do I do anthropology of war? Of like all of these things. And then like spring semester was taking all of that and just honing it down and editing and rewriting and writing and rewriting. I also really want to shout out my advisor and the thing that she did, because I thought it was amazing. And I would highly suggest other advisors, if they are able to take this into their own thesis process, because Charlene took myself and had the 3 other thesis advisees that she had and brought us all together once every 2 weeks to share the progress that we had made as a group. And so, like, we would have one-on-one meetings with her in the weeks off, but we were able to give each other advice as it was happening and sort of see everyone else's progress and know how to be able to pace ourselves in comparison with, like, our peers. And that, like, the community that formed there and the support that I got and that I gave other people was just, like, so nice.
It seems like for a lot of people, thesis is a really insular process. So having that camaraderie, that sounds like it would have made it a lot nicer to just go through.
Yeah. It also, you know, like writing can be a very insular process.
Yeah.
But you're also, when you're writing, you're also engaging in a community. You know, you're writing to an audience and you are being inspired by other people. And so what sort of creating a writing group did for me, at least, was sort of like remind me and situate me back in that community experience. And so that was cool.
What skills did you acquire or strengthen during the thesis process?
What skills did I acquire? I came into thesis with a little bit of a different background. I transferred to Reed from an art school. I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art for 1 semester, but I had been working as a freelance illustrator for about 7 years up to that point. And I had been sort of making large-scale, long-form written projects. I had done that a lot before. And so I had a lot of experience in project management, and I knew the kind of story I wanted to write. What thesis did was, one, it was an opportunity to really like have a backboard and be able to like just have a community of other people who were also going through the same thing I was going through, and just be able to sort of like go back and forth with them and learn how to not be a perfectionist and learn how to take a step back and just let a story be a story and let the end of a story be the end and not touch it anymore.
I have a post-it note that I put on my computer monitor when I'm working on papers if it still sticks, and it just says it doesn't have to be good, it just has to be done.
It doesn't have to be good, it just has to be done. You just have to graduate, because you can always come back to it. And there's stuff that I know I want to come back to in my thesis, you know, months or years or decades down the line, when I'm like, oh, you know, that really reminds me, you know, I'm working on some other project and I'm like, but the Alamo, you know, like,
But the Alamo!
You know, remember the Alamo. Like, you gotta remember, hashtag never forget, but
Remember the Alamo.
remember the Alamo. It's a good memorial.
What makes a good memorial?
Ooh, good question. So in the context specifically of national memorials and war memorials, I think there are two different answers, but I think that they are largely similar. I think that they have to respond to a specific circumstance. So like I guess the first rule is like, it depends, but listen, stay with me here. Because, and I say that because, you know, you're never going to have a universal war memorial, which is something that I ran into doing this research, where it's like, what makes a good memorial? Well, people mourn there. People remember there. That's what makes a good memorial. Something that a lot of the memorials that I did research for this thesis also do, which I personally think is really interesting, and I think it's a really nice way of sort of combating the idea of like one version of an account of events, you know? A lot of national memorials, a lot of war memorials will have one specific, or I guess not one specific way of telling the story, but they want to present it a certain way. It also can get one of the things that the memorial that I studied did to combat trying to make one narrative is they basically removed any specific imagery of a person or any symbol or any crest. So in previous versions of this memorial, because I could also go back and compare how East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, like what was their version of memorializing the victims of war and tyranny? What was Nazi Germany's version of memorializing the victims of war and tyranny? And in both of those circumstances, both of the memorials, the actions associated with them, so like the ceremonies associated with them, were militaristic, which is also interesting. You're having a memorial to the victims of war, and you're using it in a ceremony to invigorate the public into making more war, which in turn makes more victims of war. And to avoid doing that, and also to avoid using any of the sort of like German symbols that had been tainted by their usage by the Nazis and by the communist East Germans, they just took it all out. And so they use abstract representations of things, and they encourage people to walk around the space of the memorial. So there's no guards posted inside. There used to be guards posted inside. There used to be guards posted outside, and they would have a daily changing of the guard ceremony where they're like doing the Nazi goose step up until 1989 in front of the victim, a memorial to the victims of fascism, because they're trying to create, as a national memorial, it's the sort of people who are in charge of how the memorial is run and what the memorial looks like. So the various architects and builders and federal government agents, you know, they're incentivized to make the nation look strong and to make it also look sort of immortal. So they'll co-opt, you know, symbology of previous iterations of that nation. So you can trace a lot of these little symbols back to the Holy Roman Empire, and then from the Holy Roman Empire to Rome, and then it just sort of leapfrogs back and back and back. You want to create continuity. You want to make it seem like your nation has always been in power, even though in reality power changes every second.
And I assume this is kind of where the title came from.
As the guards, you know, the guardians of memory change, memory changes as well. One of the things that I wanted to make very clear in the sort of later chapters and the conclusion of my thesis is our ability to speak openly about events that have happened, and our ability to share our own memories is what makes memories. The term that I use is collective memory by Maurice Halbwachs. And, you know, that has been used in all of these different ways. I mean, that term has been around actually since a little bit before World War II. Halbwachs was a professor in France, actually. And when France was invaded, as an intellectual, he was taken to a concentration camp and he died there. And he was writing in this time when he was a German national, and he was looking at the German identity just splinter and fall away after the events of World War I, where the empire had fallen, the Weimar Republic had taken over, and it was this huge, just like tumultuous time. And I think that context is important because it sort of reminds you, like, it's these moments where the things that we take for granted are being challenged, that you realize, like, actually, like, a lot of objects in life, like memory and nations and even time, you know, those aren't necessarily objects, those are relationships. And relationships ideally are mutualistic, so you have as much power as, you know, you have power as well as everyone else has power to define what that means.
What unexpected challenges did you encounter during the thesis process?
I chose this topic fall of 2023 because that's when I was visiting Berlin for the first time. Definitely, as I started writing, the things that I was researching and sort of the events that were happening globally in politics would sometimes converge. And that was really scary. But I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, or I didn't give it too much credit until I started doing field work in Germany. And I was on memorial tours, and these were English-speaking memorial tours, but it was an international tour. a lot of people, English was their first language, but a lot of them it was their second or third language, and that was just the tour that they had available to them. We are witnessing the rise of authoritarianism globally. We are seeing anti-incumbent populist leaders gain immense political strength in their respective countries, and that is scary for a whole lot of reasons. But for this specifically, one of the things that authoritarian leaders or dictators, one of the things that they do is they really try to control how information is spread. Because information is powerful and memory is powerful. And I saw that doing historical research on this memorial, where every single time there was a change in power, the new power had to redo this memorial. They had to reconstruct it. Why? Because it's powerful. How did they do it? To make it powerful in their favor. And so the people on the different tours, people from Hungary, people from Turkey, people from, all over, they would be like, oh, well, this is happening at home. I was also in Germany when the former Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost the vote of confidence. And so they announced that they were going to have a new election for the Chancellor of Germany, which is a head honcho. Elon Musk funneled billions of dollars into that election to try to get the far-right party, the AfD party, put into that seat. Luckily, they did not win that election. But that was a real fear when I was doing my research. The era of this memorial that I was focused on the most was the sort of post-1993 era, which is the current era, which is the era of the Federal Republic of Germany. So, the most sort of modern, most democratic version that we've had in a while. And there have been a lot of pushes in Germany recently from far-right party members, from conservative politicians, to bring back a lot of the term Heroes Day was first coined during the Third Reich, and the Memorial Day that they use the Neue Wache in, the People's Day of Mourning, there's been a push in recent years to rename that to Heroes Day once again. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy just sort of watching that process happen and finding articles initially and then putting in the same search months later and being like, oh wow, new articles are being written about this currently.
That's got to feel both really good and really scary.
It definitely, I mean, the conclusions, I was sort of watching my conclusion of my thesis diverge from what was happening in real life, where I was coming to conclusions of we should not be having these really sort of jingoistic military productions that is all about how strong our country is in comparison to all of these worse countries. And, what is a citizen's life? We don't care about citizen lives because they're not of our nation. And sort of watching that happen as I'm doing this research about this memorial that was built in the aftermath of all-out war, and the kinds of conversations that people were having in the 90s of there were people being World War II during the final years, there were kids as young as 12 being enlisted into the German army to fight. And should their lives, did their lives matter? Did the people who were sexually assaulted in the War of Berlin, the Battle of Berlin, how do we remember the people who aren't soldiers, whose bodies we never found, who are missing in action? People who might not be remembered in the first place, the people who the way that warfare works now, it doesn't stay on the battlefield, it comes into your town and your home. It comes back with soldiers when they leave. And so I think that just the classical traditional ways of creating war memorials are outdated, and woefully so. And that's something that a lot of really smart architects have been trying to solve in the past few decades. There was this whole, post 1980s, really, there's been a whole push of sort of modern abstract memorials, which, so people like some of them, people hate others. It's complicated, but overall, I think that's a really positive trend. Unfortunately, we are seeing that reversed.
What was the eventual outcome of your thesis project, and was it different from what you thought it would be when you started it?
So I will say, to end on a more positive note, I know there's more after this, but in terms of sort of the culmination of this work and sort of like keeping yourself sane, I actually met so many great people through doing this work, and I learned about so many fantastic, smart, passionate, kind architects and movements and people who are thinking really hard about these questions and doing it really well. I like action, I like solutions, I'm a goal-oriented person, and so that was really relieving. It also was really healing to sit down and have really open, intense conversations with people I respected a lot in my personal life. You know, my family all read it, and my grandma read it, and she said it was cool. So thanks, Grandma. But the way that Read Thesis works is there's so much intense focus on this research, and, you know, professors from all over I would reach out to professors I had had years and years ago and get their advice. And I reached out to professors I had while I was studying abroad. And it basically realizing, like, people aren't stupid. People know all this. I mean, not the details. That's what the 146-page thesis is for. But generally, like, this is something that people really do care about. And if you have the time and if you have the energy, sitting down and putting a lot of thought into trying to write a story and trying to connect with people is going to be worth it, and people will see it and respond in kind.
How do you think your thesis experience will inform your life after Read?
I mean, there's a lot that I want to go back to. I am taking a break.
Yeah, what are your plans for this summer? How does that relate to your thesis? You're taking a break.
Plans for this summer and thesis work are on opposite sides of my brain. And right now I'm doing fiction. I'm writing fiction. I came into Read with a love for writing and making art, and I brought that energy into my thesis, and I will bring that energy into my life after Read. It's important to take breaks, and it's important to pace yourself and respect the burnout, #respect the burnout, but it also isn't done yet. And I've gotten so many good resources and good skills from Read, and I've met so many good people, and I would not give that up for the world.
What advice do you have for listeners who are starting Read or starting specifically their thesis?
It just needs to get done. I'm going to be so real with you. You just have to finish it. You can always come back. But also, yeah, like, it's a real opportunity for you. I feel like it can be very rare to have, like, the backing of an institution such as Read. And so if there's, like, resources that you're interested in and people you want to reach out to, like, this is the time. Like, you can go big, you can go bold. I was sending emails to the German Federal Archives to, like, get permissions to use their photos, which I actually didn't need to do, but it's okay.
Better safe than sorry.
Better safe than sorry. Like, send that cold email. Go wild.
Is there anyone you want to thank or acknowledge for helping you with the process?
I do. Okay. My advisor, obviously, Charlene Makeley. Shout out Charlene. She's so great. Guys, if you're at Read, if you have the opportunity to take a class with Charlene, you've got to take a class with Charlene. But also be really nice to her because she's great. I also want to shout out And thank my peer advisor group, Zoe, Emilio, Nick. Thank you to the memorial tour guides who let me shadow their tours and the participants that I interviewed. I mean, it could not have happened without you. And for the rest of you, just read the acknowledgements page in my thesis, because it's like a page long and I have so many names there.
Thank you so much for sitting down to talk with me today.
Thank you for sitting down and talking with me. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for organizing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again, Emilie. It has been nearly a year since that conversation. It was still very fun to listen back to. If you enjoyed today's interview, I hope you'll join us to hear again from more students and alumni about what it means to burn your draft. Be sure to subscribe, check out our X, Facebook, and Instagram pages, and write a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Burn Your Draft is a production of Reed College and the Center for Life Beyond Reed. Created jointly by students, alumni, and staff, this episode was produced and engineered by me, Reed College student Ace Lackey. Our executive producer is Seth Paskin, class of 1990, with technical advising from Joe Janiga. Our project manager is Nate Martin, staff member and class of 2016. Music by Jack Salvucci, class of 2020, and podcast art by alumni Henry Gotchlich and Lillian Pham. This podcast was made possible by a gift from Seth Paskin.